you're going to be like, wow, that RWBY girl is really, really cool. And I want to be your friend.
RWBY, RWBY, RWBY. And do you know how you do it to me? RWBY, RWBY, RWBY.
Hey, Arcaders! Welcome once again to Cartoon Connoisseur Theater Podcast and our new mini episode called RWBY Roundup. I'm UberNerd527. This part of the podcast is basically going over episodes of RWBY, starting with Volume 3 and going onward, where basically I'm just going to talk about my feelings for the episode and what I liked, and just generally my feelings on the episode. Now, before we begin, I do want to go over some warnings, and I apologize for those of you who are watching or listening to this episode and want to get on with it. But I just want to make sure I specifically warn people before getting started so that way they can get the maximum enjoyment out of this podcast. So first and foremost, if you've never heard of RWBY before, this episode of the podcast is not the best episode to start off with. There are plenty of episodes that you can go and watch, so feel free to go on our feed or the website, thearcadearchives.com or zowiekrapowry.com, and go ahead and look at those episodes. But this episode is specifically about RWBY. If you've never seen RWBY before, there are many places you can watch them. Obviously, you can go to roosterteeth.com. Rooster Teeth was the company that created the show. You can also watch it on Netflix. You can watch it on Crunchyroll, or you can also watch it on YouTube as well. So feel free to watch it. I highly suggest it, especially if you're an anime fan. And if you're kind of curious about it, maybe you want to find a little bit more information. We did do an episode of the Cartoon Connoisseur Theater about RWBY. I think is a pretty good introduction to the world of RWBY and the characters and all that. And that was done with Dave, Podcast Pasco from the 52 Now podcast, Cheryl from Pink Justice Cosplay, and also Dakota, who works a site called Geek Critique. And by the way, I want to take an aside. Dakota, if you're listening to this, I definitely want to invite you to join me for the last episode of the season, and maybe we can have a discussion of whether we liked it or anything like that. So this is my formal thing out to you, Dakota, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. Now, I also want to warn those of you who are RWBY fans that this episode also spoils the episode that we're going to be talking about. So make sure that you listen or watch the episode first before listening to this podcast, because I will not be pulling punches with my spoilers. So please make sure you watch the episode first. Okay, that was a mouthful. Very sorry about that. Wanted to get that out of the way first. Please forgive me. This is probably going to be the introduction to every single episode of this, just so I can make sure that people understand about this specific episode of Cartoon Connoisseur Theater. All right, now without further ado, let's go into the episode, RWBY Volume 3, Episode 2, entitled New Challengers. Let me first say that I'm very, very excited about having a tournament. There's something about tournament episodes in anime that really, really get you excited and almost make you feel like you're watching this tournament live on TV. I can remember watching episodes of Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and even Pokemon, and getting excited about when they had tournament story arcs, watching the fighters go. In fact, I'm not a huge fan of the Pokemon anime, but I will say that when they did have tournament and gym battles, they really excelled with a lot of the writing. Now, admittedly, I haven't really watched Pokemon since the Ruby and Sapphire generation, so I don't know whether they dropped the ball or not. But from what I remember from the anime, tournament story arcs were some of the best story arcs I can remember. I really did enjoy that, and this is no exception. Now, episode 2 starts off where we left off in episode 1. We left off with Team Juniper, which is Jean Arc, Pura Nikos, Nora Valkyrie, and Lyran, and they were basically about to face off against Team Bronze for their round 1 of the tournament. And that's where it stopped. And basically, we just pick up right where we left off with episode 2. Now, let me tell you that this fight between Team Juniper and Team Bronze, man, awesome. So good. And not just because of the fight scenes, which, by the way, are top notch. What don't you expect from RWBY with top notch fighting? I mean, really. But this this episode was not only just fighting wise was amazing, but also humor. This episode of the season was very, very comical, very, very funny, and this part of the episode was not an exception. It was definitely part of it. So Team Juniper goes off against Team Bronze. You can really see that Team Juniper is working a little bit better as a team. I think this is probably the first time we've actually seen Team Juniper fight as a team since probably season 1, maybe a little bit in season 2, but we haven't really seen them fight as a team yet. And I think season 1, season 2, a little bit in season 2, not so much, but we haven't really seen them since work as a team. How's that for a compromise? Anyways, and they work very, very well. First of all, I want to say that John, I want to kind of comment because RWBY said it as well in the episode, but John has really improved fighting-wise, but most importantly, tactic-wise. He is a really great tactician on the battlefield. He may not be the best fighter, but he is definitely a great tactician, and he knows how to use all his the members of his team in very, very wonderful ways. So, you know, he really, really stepped it up a notch, and I was really kind of proud of him, actually, seeing him actually fight and actually doing a great job of it. But not only that, but being a really great leader was another part of it that I enjoyed very, very much. He is a good leader on the battlefield. He is a great tactician, and he really, really knows his stuff. So I was really impressed by him. I mean, I'm always impressed with Pyrrha and with Ren. I can't really say anything about them because they're always awesome to watch. But the other breakout star was Nora. Nora was amazing in this episode. We have really never seen her fight like this, really. She really just stole the scene, which really is just kind of her MO. Anytime she shows up in RWBY, she steals the show. And she always has the best lines. She always does the funniest and coolest things. And this episode is no exception. She does amazing. And you actually get to see her semblance for once. For those of you who don't remember, semblances are basically each individual's power they can use. Each person has a different power. And Nora's is that she can actually channel electricity into her muscles and use them very similar but not the same as Yang. Yang can basically take hits and take that all those hits that she takes and actually dish them back out. Very similar, but only with electricity. She can only use electricity as kind of her ability, which kind of brings it into the fact that she's also kind of the representation of Thor. So you really get to see it in this, and you really get to see her really just go crazy and go nuts. I also want to take a side here and say that one of the things I said in last episode was I really like the self-referential humor that they've been having this season. And in this episode, there's a lot of self-referential humor. And one of them happens to be the funniest part of Team Juniper's battle. That is when John calls out team attack names, very similar to what RWBY did in season 2, but they are confused and don't know what they're talking about. Now, I'm not going to go into the significance of the team attack names. If you're a RWBY fan, you already know what I'm talking about. You know why they're called, specifically why they're called. But I'm not going to go into that. I just want to say that it was really funny that they referenced this, that people were confused about it, that John was trying to be cool like Team RWBY and it just didn't work out. And I really, really enjoyed that just moment of just absolute hilarity. As I just saw that. Now, here's my thing about Jean. I touched on it a little bit. I just want to bring this back real quick. And I really enjoy Jean's character. I really enjoy Pyrrha. And I literally enjoy all of Team Juniper. And I'm very excited to see them again and see them in full force in this episode. And basically, they took the starring role in this first part of the episode, which is weird because usually it's just Team RWBY that's the center of attention, but we actually get to pull back, and Team RWBY actually is just sitting in the crowd just watching all this go on, and I just think that's kind of interesting. Now, after the fight with Team Juniper, they of course win and move on to round 2. And after that fight, we go into a bar called, of all things, Crowbar. I'm not kidding. Look at the sign. It says Crowbar. It even has crowbars on the sign. And in the bar, we are introduced to a character I've been very excited to finally see, and hear from, is RWBY and Yang's Uncle Crow. Now, they don't flat out say it, but of course, if you've been watching anything RWBY, if you've been watching this series, you know who that is. You know that's their Uncle Crow. You know that we've been talking about him since season 1, really, and just we're really, really excited about hearing. I'm just excited to actually see him and hear from him for once. And you really see that he's just sitting in that bar and he's waiting for something. You don't know exactly what yet, but he is waiting for something to happen. Now, I don't know whether he's partially paying attention to the matches or anything, but you can see that he's really not interested in this tournament at all. But he is waiting for something or someone, and we'll get into that here in just a minute. So it's just a brief little reprieve, and then it goes on to another match, and that is round 1 of a team called Team Sun. Now, if you've been watching RWBY for the past couple of seasons, you know Sun and you know Neptune, and you get to meet the other guys in their team, and they go off against a team called Team Indigo. So you have the all-team guy team versus the all-girl team, and it's kind of an interesting fight, even though most of it is pretty much comedy. There are some really cool fight moments, but really this fight was more comedy than actual seriousness. I really love that Neptune is afraid of the water. I thought that was really funny, and I really enjoyed it. In fact, if you know, the fact that he's called Neptune and the fact that he's afraid of water is just very, very ironic, and I really, really enjoyed that as well. Just all the hilarity along with it. I also will say that Team Indigo's design, as well as Team Bronze, was really, really kind of neat, kind of different. I didn't say this earlier, so I'll go ahead and say it now. The sniper on Team Bronze was really, really cool. I loved her sniper rifle. I loved how that worked, and I'm hoping to see maybe more of her later on as they move on to the story. Then after Team Sun wins, by the way, they had a hard time of it. It wasn't an easy fight, but they do end up winning in the end. Just absolute and hilarity through the whole thing. By the way, also kind of a piratey type fight, very Pirates of the Caribbean, if you will. So that was kind of neat. So after that, you go back to the Crowbar, and you see Uncle Crow there, and he's waiting, and then all of a sudden you see a ship in the distance. And Uncle Crow gets up and walks off of the bar, saying that he wasn't waiting for those fights in the tournament. He was waiting for this fight, pointing to the ship that was coming in, leading me to believe that he was waiting for Winter. Now, again, if you've been watching RWBY, you know who Winter is. Winter is Weiss's sister. And so we actually get to be introduced to her in, I believe, the next episode. Yes, folks, and I will make this joke, Winter is coming. I am so, so sorry for those of you Game of Thrones fans who are listening to this. I had to make that joke at least once. I will never make it again, I promise. Okay? So anyways, that's pretty much the episode. There's really no... Let me go into my thoughts first before I go into that. So my thoughts on the episode. Good things. First of all, great fighting choreography as usual. There is no amount to awesome fight scenes, and this is what Rooster Teeth does very, very well. They do fighting scenes and they choreograph. They put it together very, very well. I'm trying to sound smarter than I am, and I'm sorry. Anyways, so they do it very, very well. They're very good at doing fight scenes, and I really, really was impressed with all the fighting in this episode, even as opposed to last episode, because we only really got one fight, and that was Team RWBY's fight. So, and it was very, very short. So, this one you get two awesome fights and two just really, really, really good just stories and wonderful things that happen. Now, I will also say that this episode was absolutely hilarious. There were some funny moments in this episode. Like, it was almost wall-to-wall funny. There were serious moments, and I even think that this episode was more silly than the last episode. Last episode was a little more straight with a little bit of funny sprinkled here and there. But this episode was flat out just funny, serious, funny, serious, funny, serious. It just went back and forth, and it was really, really fun. It was a good balance, I think, of funny and serious. I will also say my favorite line has to be in the Team Sun versus Team Indigo fight, where Neptune sees the water, freezes up, and then the minute the fight starts, he runs up this hill in the battlefield and saying, Sun's yelling out to him, "Well, what are you doing? Why are you on the enemy's side?" He's like, they will never expect it. And just one of the girls at Team Indigo goes, "He's right. I wouldn't expect that." I just thought that was hilarious. So, it was very, very funny. There are some very quotable lines in this episode. So especially the Nowhere, just hit him with a hammer, was just absolutely wonderful. Now, here's a little bit of the not so good of this episode. I'm trying to mix a little bit of the good with bad. I'm trying not to be full on geek and just gush over everything. I want to try to bring you some of good and some of bad. And the only really bad thing that I have about this episode is there's really no story meat per se. Now, I am fully aware that this is only the second episode of this season, and I'm not even really sure how many episodes this season is going to have. I'm also very aware, especially kind of a writer myself, I'm very aware of the fact that this is only the first act of this story arc. And you have to really kind of introduce a lot of things. You have to kind of set up your domino pieces so that when you knock them down, people understand what's going on. I understand that, and I'm fully aware of that. Although this episode, unlike the first episode, really didn't get me excited for what's to come, other than the fact of, Team Sun's in round 2, Team Juniper's in round 2, and seeing Uncle Crow and knowing that winter will come. Except for those few things, it really didn't get me excited for the next episode, the way that episode 1 did. So that was my only gripe about the show, really, is that it just seemed like there was no real excitement. There was no real story meat to kind of go over in my head. It was just, here's 2 fights. Here's some funny moments. All right, we're moving on. I think this is more of an introduction to Team Juniper and Team Sun and kind of what they can do to kind of bring that back later on. So I think that's basically what this is. But still, as a whole, this is still kind of a very quick kind of, this is kind of the desserts kind of episode where everything's just really, really cool. There's no meat. There's no anything story-wise that are really, really exciting. So my predictions for next episode, I really think that the next episode is going to be serious. I think that's why this second episode was really, really funny, really, really silly, very, very quotable, because this episode is leading into a very serious episode. And I may be wrong. The next episode may be funny too, and then eventually a couple of episodes maybe get funny, and then we'll get into some serious stuff. I don't know. But my prediction is, especially since winter is coming, sorry. I didn't mean to do that again. It came out of my mouth before I could stop myself. Anyways, I think that the next episode is going to be a very serious episode, and we're going to get some story meat here finally. So I'm very, very excited about that, and to see what comes out of it. So, are we going to see these teams again? And not just Team Sun and Team Juniper, because I'm very sure we'll probably see them again, but are we going to see the other teams that they've been showing that in the different rounds? Are we going to see them again? Because I really did enjoy some of their characters, and I actually kind of want to see a little bit more about some of them. And, hopefully we'll get to see them. Hopefully they're not like some of the background characters in a lot of episodes where people really, really like them, but they never do anything with them. So, I hope to see more of them. Hopefully, maybe. We'll see. Finally, I want to really touch on at the end of the credits of the episode, they showed a lot of the artwork for the new different characters, and also some of the artwork probably some of the custom artwork that they've been working on for this episode, and that artwork was gorgeous. I don't know who the artist is. I'm very sorry. I didn't do a whole lot of research on it, but that artwork was gorgeous, and whoever did it should be very, very much applauded for what they did, because that artwork really, really is cool, and I got to really, I even kind of paused it at times just to look at some of the stuff that they did. So credit to them. Very, very great and very fun. So that's pretty much it for this episode of RWBY Roundup. I cannot wait for episode 3, and I hope you guys can't wait either. Remember, if you like this episode, if you like Cartoon Connoisseur Theater, please help us out by going to iTunes and subscribing, as well as leaving us a review. I would really, really, really appreciate a review on iTunes. It will really help us out, get our name out there, get people to listening to the podcast. Also, I want to say that if you want to comment on this, feel free. If you're listening at the website, thearcadearchives.com. Again, it's thearcadearchives.com. If you're listening to the episode here on the website, please comment. I want to know what your thoughts are on this episode. And if you're not on WordPress, feel free to go to Twitter, at TailsFTGameGrid. Again, that's at TailsFTGameGrid. And you can comment through there as well. And feel free to leave your comments there anytime. And thank you so much for joining us here for Cartoon Connoisseurs Theater's RWBY Roundup. And I hope to see you guys again. And like always, don't forget to play like it's 1981. Have a nice night, folks.
Ruby, 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 Ruby. And do you? Know what you doing to me? Ruby, 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 Ruby.
Thank you for joining us for this Arcade Archives Network video. If you like this, please make sure to subscribe to this channel and leave comments below. If you would like more, please go to thearcadearchives.com or zowikerpowie.com. Thank you so much once again for joining us for this Arcade Archives Network video, and don't forget to keep playing like it's 1981.
Message from headquarters. This is a Rebellion production and is part of the Arcade Archives Network. That is all.